Good afternoon. Good morning. So used to doing the show in the afternoon before that it threw me off. Good morning. Welcome to the January 7th, 2023 edition of Just Parlays with Chris King. Of course, I'm your host, Chris King. As you see, there's nobody else here. So there you go. Welcome to the first edition of the show in 2023. Hopefully you guys had a safe and happy new year to get through the end of 2022, and hopefully 2023 has gotten off to a solid start for you as well. A lot of stuff to unpack this week as we head into the end of the NFL regular season, the end of college football for the season. We're still right in the thick of the NBA, the NHL, and of course there's roughly 472 college basketball games on Saturdays from now until, conference tournament time. So the next 7 or 8 weeks going to be quite full of college hoops as we wind towards March Madness. We'll start the show by talking about, of course, what happened on Monday night. As you know, it was supposed to be one of the biggest games of the year with the Bengals and the Bills battling on Monday Night Football. Of course, we all saw what happened to Damar Hamlin, and the fallout from that game. The good part is Hamlin is on the road to recovery. The thing that the injury brought was it brought everyone together around the league for at least a little bit. You've seen his foundation generate over $8 million in donations this week. And of course, everybody heard about how when he woke up, the first thing he asked was, "Did we win?" And of course, the doctor said, "Yeah, you won the game of life." And like so many people have said, that was the most important thing all week long. And of course, now the fallout from that is, the game was declared a no contest, and we have to sift through a series of results that, inevitably have splintered some of that unity because now everybody's bent out of shape about who's going to have home field advantage and who isn't. And, that's not what the game is about. The game, when everyone was united about what happened to Hamlin, that was what a microcosm of what the NFL fan base is all about. It was everybody coming together to support one thing, and now everybody's gone back their separate ways, and it's kind of sad because in the span of 72 hours, you went from unity to all hell breaking loose because Kansas City fans think they're being wronged if they don't get to host the AFC title game at Arrowhead, and everybody else thinks they're being wronged, and none of that should be the factor here. Unfortunately, that's the way the world works sometimes. You have to be King Solomon and split the baby and figure out what works out best. Is it the right answer? Who knows? Does it really matter in the grand scheme of things? Not really. But like we said, we've got Week 18 football starting tonight. You got 2 games. You got the Chiefs and the Raiders at 4:30 Eastern. Then you've got the Jaguars and the Titans at 8 o'clock or 8:15, whenever they decide to, kick it off. Should be a pair of interesting matchups, of course. The AFC South will be decided in that Jacksonville game. We'll see Josh Dobbs make career start number 2 for the Titans as they try to stop a 5-game losing streak. Remember back at the beginning of December or late November, Titans were 7-3 and they were just rolling. A 6-game losing streak. They were 7-3 and rolling right along. Now they're 7-9. Meanwhile, we watched Jacksonville turn things around. They played miserable football early on. They lost to Houston back in Week 5. That was part of a 5-game losing streak where Jacksonville was 2-6. And since then, they've turned around. They've gone 6-2. They lost to Kansas City at Arrowhead, and they had a blowout loss to Detroit at the end of November, 40-14. But since then, they beat the Titans on the road. They beat Dallas in overtime at home. They beat the Jets on the road, and they beat Houston on the road, giving up just 3 points in each of those last two games. Now they get Tennessee at home. Lot to go there. It's going to be interesting to see how those pan out. Morning, Andrew. Good to see you. Morning, Crystal. The Rangers and the Bruins. Yeah, the Devils, for some reason, they play good hockey when they're not at home, but when they play at the Prudential Center, it's like they forgot how to play, because if you look at their splits, they're 14-2-1 as the visiting team, but they're just 10-10-2 at home. The Rangers trying to gain some ground there. They're only 1 point back of New Jersey now, who's cooled off after that hot start. The Rangers have won 3 straight. The Bruins, 7-0-3 in their last 10. They've only got 4 regulation losses all season. Personally, I'd like to see them lose a few, but as well as the Kings have played, it's tough to beat that Boston team. They don't beat themselves. I'm sorry, not Boston. I was thinking of yesterday's game when Boston won. The Bruins still cruising along, though. They'll face. They're playing San Jose. That's right. The good old San Jose Sharks, who give up a truckload of goals every night. Yeah, you've got to like the Bruins there. Sharks just 4-10-6 at home. They don't really have a good goaltender. I mean, you look, and both Reimer and Kakkonen both have goals against over 3 and save percentages under 900. Kakkonen is especially bad at 379 and 869, respectively. What can you say is good about the Sharks, other than, Erik Karlsson's had a good season offensively? That's about it. Let's see, what else have we got? We've got the college football playoff national championship game on Monday. Of course, last week we talked about TCU being a live dog, and of course they won outright as Michigan played horribly on defense. They also threw 2 pick sixes. They went for a trick play inside the 5. They fumbled the ball at the 1. And then everybody wanted to talk about how Michigan got hosed at the end because there should have been a targeting penalty. If you play that badly for 59-plus minutes, you deserve to lose. I mean, let's face it. I thought Michigan was overrated going in. I thought they would win the game, but I thought TCU would cover. And as it turned out, Michigan, just because they had been there before, it didn't matter. Then we saw another scintillating game with Georgia, Ohio State, where it went right down to the wire. And you got to feel bad for Noah Ruggles, because everybody's going to remember him for missing the field goal at the end of the game. But when you get right down to it, Ohio State had the ball at the 32-yard line on first down, and they still had timeouts. And they didn't gain another yard. I didn't understand the play calling on that particular drive. After you get into Georgia territory, I mean, you look at what took place, and Stroud had the big run, and then you look at the final plays after that. 1st and 10. You look at it there, and 1st and 10 from the 31, you run for -1 yards, then you call a timeout, then you throw 2 incomplete passes. It was poor execution and probably poor play calling by Ryan Day, because if you pick up 5 or 6 yards, a 44 or 45-yard field goal is a lot easier than 50. Especially in such a pressure situation where you're trying to rely on, a 19, 20, 21-year-old kid to kick a field goal with the game on the line. But, Georgia or Ohio State, they let it slip away, and now we see Georgia with a chance to repeat as national champions. It's going to be an interesting game. I know Georgia's a heavy favorite. But, like we saw last week, TCU was a solid underdog against Michigan, and it didn't matter. Now you're looking at most books, they're 12.5-point underdogs here. And for long stretches, Georgia didn't look great. You saw Kenny McIntosh get tripped by the 13-yard line when he should have had a score. And this TCU team isn't intimidated by anybody. They took their punches in that game, and they still came back and punched Michigan in the mouth when it mattered. I know Miller is a question mark for TCU here. But, you still have DeMercado. Max Duggan can obviously do damage with his legs as well. Georgia had their issues defensively against Ohio State, and TCU has some versatility in there where they can make it interesting. I don't think Georgia wins this one in a blowout. I think it's going to be a closer game than people expect, because it'll be just like last week. I think you've got to like TCU with the points there. Then, of course, we saw Chris Beard get fired at Texas. Not a whole lot to say about that, other than that's just going to show you that guaranteed contracts aren't necessarily the way to go for coaches, because that's yet another big chunk of money that the University of Texas has to pay out to a coach that isn't there anymore. And the big question is, what in the world is going on with the rims in Denver? Because they had a rim delay again yesterday for the second time this week. Of course, they had one against Boston earlier in the week. Why are these rims being bent all the time? What is going on with Denver? You can't blame the altitude for a rim bending. Just very bizarre. We saw, of course, the Lakers beat the Hawks last night. The strange results from last night's games, of course, the Hornets blew out Milwaukee 138-109. The Bulls beat the 76ers 126-112. And I get the Bucks, didn't seem motivated, but come on, Antetokounmpo finished with 9 points in 22 minutes. He missed 6 out of 11 free throws. You gave up 51 points in the first quarter to Charlotte. Now, that Charlotte starting five is not the murderer's row of basketball. But you let all of them get in double figures. Jalen McDaniels had 11. Mason Plumlee had 17 points and 15 rebounds, shot 8 of 9 from the floor. P.J. Washington had 23. LaMelo Ball had 24 and 12 assists. And Scary Terry Rozier had 39. If I was a fan sitting in the Fiserv Forum last night, I would ask for my money back, because that was just horrendous. Like we said, NFL today, the 2 games, and then we've got everybody else playing tomorrow. Still some playoff spots up for grabs. We've still got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 teams battling for 2 spots, and it really boils down to 3 teams battling for 1 spot in the AFC, because whoever wins Jacksonville, Tennessee, wins the South. If Tennessee wins, and that would knock Jacksonville out of the playoff picture. So you basically got New England, Miami, and Pittsburgh battling for a wild card spot. Miami's dropped 5 in a row. They'll start Skylar Thompson against the Jets, who will start Joe Flacco in the battle of, age versus beauty, with Thompson being a rookie and Flacco being roughly 47 years into the league by now. New England goes to Buffalo. Of course, that's going to be an emotional scene. the league, doing patches and stuff to honor Hamlin on jerseys, and there'll be warm-up shirts and everything else. The Steelers play the Browns. Cleveland's got their own problems. You saw the sniping between Jadeveon Clowney and Myles Garrett and the rest of the franchise, and Cleveland's fallen apart in year one of the Deshaun Watson era. You look at the NFC, and you've got, Philadelphia's in, and Dallas is in, and Minnesota and Tampa Bay won the NFC South last week, and the 49ers, won their division like an eternity ago. So you're down to the Lions and the Packers and the Seahawks, and that's it for the final playoff spot in the NFC. Detroit and Green Bay will play each other in the 8 o'clock game for Sunday Night Football to determine what happens there. Seattle's got a pulse, but it's a faint one as far as trying to make the postseason. I believe the Seahawks have to win and pray that I think Detroit doesn't win. Let me see what the actual situation is for them. I was looking at it yesterday, and it's going to be, I know it's interesting to say the least. You look at some of these teams. Seattle has to win and Green Bay has to lose, which is weird because Detroit beat Seattle earlier Seattle won that one. What was it, 48-45? That's right. So Green Bay has to lose to Detroit, and Seattle has to beat the Rams. Ought to be an interesting game. Geno Smith lit up the Rams in the first meeting this season, going for 367 in a 27-23 win. 367 and 3 scores, scoring the winning touchdown with 36 seconds left on the road at SoFi Stadium to give Seattle the win there. At that point, the Seahawks were 7-5. Since then, they've lost 3 of 4. Before it was 3 straight before beating the Jets last week. Tyler Lockett expected to play, which will be important for the Seahawks for sure. So a lot of games to talk about. A lot of stuff going on around the league. And with that said, we can talk about 3 for the money, which if you were here last week, we told you to take the wild Iowa, Kentucky under 31. And we also talked about Dallas over San Antonio. And that panned out. So you would have, when I punched it through last night, if you had taken the Mavs on the money line and the Wild on the puck line, and then Iowa, Kentucky under 31, would have paid out just under 7-1. So good start on that front. But before I get to that, let's make sure I do the housekeeping, because otherwise, I don't want to forget. Make sure you hit the like button, subscribe, and hit the bell so you'll never miss the show. Of course, as of right now, like we said, we're on Saturday mornings at 9. Still waiting to hear what you guys think about if Saturday mornings are better or if Friday night is better. Because personally for me, I wouldn't mind Friday nights because then I wouldn't be up at 9 o'clock in the morning. But I know sometimes so many things change, so many lines shift and stuff overnight that things can be a lot different than what they were the day before. And but still, let us know if the morning is better, if Friday night is better, so that way we can come up with the best strategy to maximize your profits. Also, if you don't get enough picks from here, or if you are or are not a premium subscriber, make sure you check those out because there's a lot of good handicappers out there, not just me. You've got Scott Steen, who you guys see all the time on his daily videos. You've got Dave Delano. You've got Mason Foles, Arthur Reyes, all those guys do quality work. Of course, Ben Hayes and David Hess, you don't see them on videos as much, but you've got their picks as well. And for watching the show, if you look down in the show box below, there is a 4-team parlay that's available for you. You can get it for $10, but if you use the promo code that I listed in the show box as well, you can save 50% off. That's right. I said $10. It's $5. Can't go wrong with that. And you can also use that promo code for any of the other packages that I have available on the site. So make sure you check it out at experts.winnersandwhiners.com and get yourself in the winning ways. I mean, this week alone on the parlay side, we had a 4-teamer on Monday night that paid better than 12-1. Wednesday night, we had a 6-teamer that could have been even bigger because two of the teams that we had, Iowa State and Wofford, were underdogs that won outright. But that 6-teamer paid almost 47-1. So even if you had bet $5, you would have walked away with a couple hundo in the end. Those kind of hits are good when they come up. So you should take advantage. Well, strike while the iron is hot, as they say. And with that said, we will move to 3 for the money. Oh, I forgot to change the date, but it's supposed to be January 7th. Last night when I was putting everything together, I just didn't change the date on the slide. The Seattle Kraken over the Ottawa Senators. Ottawa, I can't figure out other than they like to play bad hockey for long stretches of games. Senators still trying to find their way up the Atlantic Division standings. They are tied for 6th. They're they're tied with Detroit. They're 6 points ahead of Montreal, who's in the basement. They're 1 point behind Buffalo, who's tied for 4th with Florida. But they're 10 points behind Tampa Bay for the final guaranteed playoff spot in the Atlantic. They're out on the outside looking in at the wild cards. They're 7 points behind the Islanders for the second wild card. I get they're 6-3-1 in their last 10. I get they've won 2 in a row. But the Senators, they're an inconsistent hockey team. They beat Buffalo and they beat Columbus. I know they beat the Bruins a week or 10 days ago in overtime. But this is a Seattle team that's played pretty good hockey. They've won 3 straight. They beat Toronto the other night at the Scotiabank Arena rather soundly. They're 11-4-2 on the road. They've got the final guaranteed playoff spot in the Pacific right now. They're 21-12-4 for 46 points. They're 1 point ahead of the Flames and 2 ahead of the Oilers with 3 games in hand on each of those teams. And they're 4 back of the Kings, but they have 5 games in hand on Los Angeles at this point. Seattle's been a very good offensive team so far. You've seen Matty Beniers step up. You've seen McCann and Vince Dunn and a bunch of other guys. I like them a lot more than I like an Ottawa team that, for all their offensive talent that they picked up, they've got Kachuk, they got Batherson, they got Claude Giroux, they've got DeBrincat, they've got Stutzel. They still don't stop anybody in their own end. Talbot, he's 10-9-1. His goals against 275. Forsberg 7-8-2. They're just a middle of the road team at best. They don't play well when it comes to crunch time a lot of times, and it's hard to have faith in them. The Jaguars, I'm going to give the points here. We saw them beat Tennessee by 2 touchdowns in a game that wasn't that close in the first meeting. And in that game, Tennessee still had Ryan Tannehill. guess what? Now they don't. We know Malik Willis is terrible. That's why he got benched. So now it's Josh Dobbs, who now has one career start under his belt after last week. He was okay against Dallas. I mean, what was he, 22 of 36 or something like that? But the fact remains, can you trust a guy that's barely been in the system? Because you got to remember, he was picked up off waivers or off the practice squad from somewhere else and then basically was thrust in. Sorry, he was 20 of 39 for 232, a touchdown and an interception. I mean, he kept Tennessee in the game. It was 17-13 after three quarters. But here's the problem with Tennessee. They don't play defense. I know they bottled up Zeke Elliott, held him to 37 yards on 19 carries. But Tennessee's problem is they can't stop the pass. You look at their numbers this season, and the Titans have been just absolutely brutal when it comes to defending the pass. They're dead last offensively in first downs. They're dead last against the pass. They've given up the second most touchdown passes in the league. They've given up at least 300 yards through the air 4, 5, 6, 7 times in 16 games. The one team that they held two teams under 200 yards. They held the Giants in the opener to 156, but in that game they gave up 238 yards on the ground. And the other team they held under 200 yards through the air was Houston back on October 30th, where they gave 118 yards through the air, 43 on the ground, and still only won 17-10. You look lately, they gave up 266 to the Bengals, 386 to Philadelphia, 368 to Jacksonville in the first meeting, 291 to the Chargers, 215 to Houston 2 weeks ago, and 274 last week. Of course, those net passing yards, but we're talking about a Tennessee team that has been awful against the pass all year long. They've got a weak secondary. They've got a bunch of guys that are on injured reserve now. Bud Dupree is done for the year. Cunningham is done for the year. You're trying to rely and hope that secondary holds up. Andrew Adams also hit IR this week. So you're dealing with, they've got Byard back there in the secondary, but do you trust anybody else? I mean, Roger McCreary's been lit up, and he was a first-round pick. Their other defensive backs are nothing to write home about. Amani Hooker, he plays safety, not very well. Christian Fulton has been injury-prone, doesn't make a lot of plays. And if they don't get any pressure, it makes it tough. And, outside of Autry, who has 8 sacks, and Walker has 7, and Jeffrey Simmons has 7.5, there's not a ton of guys that are going to get after the passer. If you let Trevor Lawrence sit back there like he did in the first meeting, which was less than a month ago, it was December 11th. If you let Lawrence sit back there, and in that game he was 30 for 42 for 368 yards and 3 touchdowns, didn't get sacked. It's going to be a long day. I mean, Tannehill in that game was 25 of 38, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, but he got sacked 4 times. And, of course, now he's not playing. Tennessee's going to have to control the line of scrimmage offensively. Derrick Henry's going to have another big game. He went for 121 in that game, but he also fumbled twice. But I don't see Tennessee being able to keep up against Jacksonville here, especially playing at home. There's so much at stake for the Jaguars. Be nice for Doug Peterson in his first year down there to cap things off with a postseason berth. And, of course, Travis Kelce, over 6.5 catches. In 7 of his last 10 meetings with the Raiders, he's caught at least 7 passes. Of course, in the first meeting this season, that Monday night game, Kelsey caught 7 passes for all of 25 yards, but scored multiple times as the Chiefs outlasted the Raiders with some help from officiating. But you're getting plus money here. The Chiefs know if they win, they'll have home field advantage, at least until the AFC title game, which could be on a neutral field. It's hard to have faith in the Raiders' defense stopping him because they've had so many problems doing it all year long and over the last few years. So look for that. Look for Kelsey to catch at least 7 or 8 balls here. The Chiefs are going to be motivated because they want to get home field. The Raiders are just going through the motions, I guess, and they can't stop anyone against the pass anyway. If you bet the money line on those three, 467.43, mainly because of the fact that the Jaguars line is so high. If you bet the money line, or the puck line for the Kraken and the point spread for Jacksonville, 11.92.93. So not bad on that front. And that takes us to 4 for the show. This is one of the 4 teamers I have on the premium side. I like Golden State over Orlando. I know Golden State stumbled the other night when they lost to Detroit. Well, let's face it, the Warriors have played pretty good basketball at home this season, which is where this game is. It's at the Chase Center. Golden State comes in. They are 17-3 at home compared to 3-16 on the road. Orlando, they had that good stretch where they won, 7 of 8 or 8 of 9 last month. But reality is set back in for Orlando. They've lost 4 of their last 5, 3 of those by double figures. They lost by 19 to the Lakers at home. They lost by 20 on the road to the Pistons. They lost by 19 at home to the Wizards. They beat the Thunder, who were playing the second game of a back-to-back Wednesday night. And then they lost to Memphis Thursday night when both teams were playing the second game of a back-to-back. The Magic just 14-25 on the season. As a road team, they're 4-13. You have to think that Golden State will bounce back with a vengeance after that horrible showing against Detroit, where they basically loafed around the whole game thinking that they could kick it in late, and then got stunned when Sadiq Bey hit that buzzer beater to knock them off 122-119. Golden State, despite being one game above 500, sits in the final guaranteed playoff spot in the Western Conference. Heading into this one, they're a percentage point ahead of the Clippers. The Western Conference, it's pretty crowded. 13 teams are within 5 games of 500. The Jazz hold the final spot in the play-in tournament right now at 20-21. The Thunder, 17-22, are in 13th place. So a lot of parity in the league because from Dallas is 22-17, Sacramento 20-17, Golden State 20-19, the Clippers 21-20, Phoenix 20-20, Portland 19-19, Utah 20-21, Minnesota 19-21, the Lakers 18-21, Oklahoma City 17-22, and the Spurs and the Rockets nobody cares about because they're terrible. So the Western Conference, despite all that parity, still looks better than the East because you're looking at the Eastern Conference and you've got 8 teams over 500, and then the Bulls are 18-21, the Hawks are 18-21, and they hold spots 9 and 10 in the play-in tournament. Washington 17-23, the Raptors 16-23, the Magic 14-25. Charlotte 11-29, the Pistons 11-31. So the East is, as it's been in recent years, is rather top heavy because Boston and Milwaukee and Brooklyn and Cleveland all have at least 25 wins, and Philadelphia has 23, the Knicks 22, the Pacers 22. and Miami is up to 21, and then everybody else is below 500. Gonzaga over Santa Clara. Gonzaga had a tough battle with San Francisco the other night. Santa Clara's played good basketball. I was surprised when I looked and said, "Hey, look, Santa Clara is 14-4 on the season, but they lost. They did cover, but they lost to St. Mary's. They beat Pepperdine on the road, and they've beaten Boise State. They beat Cal. They beat UC Irvine, which was a game that surprised me earlier in December. But this is still a Gonzaga team that can light you up. And, we've seen Gonzaga. They started off kind of sluggishly. They were 5-3 after losing to Baylor. But since then, they beat Kentucky. They beat Alabama on a neutral floor. They beat Washington. They lit up Pepperdine to the tune of 111 points last week. It might be tough for Santa Clara to hang in against a Gonzaga team that, has a lot of experience. They have a lot of depth. They have a lot of weapons. And it's tough to keep them in check for 40 minutes, as a lot of teams have found out lately. I think you've got to lean towards the Bulldogs in that one. Derrick Henry over 92.5 rushing yards. Well, like we said, if Tennessee's going to have a chance, Henry's going to have to put up numbers, because that's basically where we're at this point. And we're looking at you look at what Henry's done against Jacksonville in recent games. Like we said, he had 17 carries for 121 yards and a score in the first meeting this season. In the one meeting he faced Jacksonville last year, 29 carries, 130 yards, and 3 scores. In 2020, he had 26 carries for 215 and 2 scores. In the first meeting in 2020, he had 25 for 84. And then in the first meeting in 2019, 19 carries, 159 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So in the last 5 games against Jacksonville, you're talking about, we have 243, 458, 578, 679 yards, and 9 touchdowns against Jacksonville. So 92.5, definitely in the realm of attainability for sure. And I mean, you're getting basically a pick 'em odds on it, so you can't go wrong with that. And the Blues over the Canadians. Let's face it, Montreal is terrible. They've lost 7 in a row. They're at the bottom of the Atlantic. They're second worst in the East, thanks to Columbus completely sucking. The only thing that's good about Montreal is you can say that they're the best of the last place teams in the league, because Chicago has 22 points in the Central. Columbus has 24 in the Metropolitan. And Anaheim has, I think it's 28 in the Pacific Division. But you're looking at a Montreal team. Here's their last 7 games. They lost 2-1 to Colorado. That's the only single goal loss they have in this stretch. They lost 4-2 to Dallas. They lost 4-1 to Tampa Bay. They lost 7-2 to Florida, 9-2 to Washington, 6-3 to Nashville, 4-1 to the Rangers. And going back before that, they had lost 3 straight before holding off Arizona 3-2. They lost 5-1 to Tampa Bay. They lost 5-2 to Anaheim. And they lost 3-2 to the Senators. So 10 losses in 11 games for Montreal. I don't like the Blues. They've got a lot of injuries. O'Reilly and Tarasenko and Torrey Krug are all on IR. Their goaltending's been suspect. But, hey, they've gone 6-2-2 in their last 10. They're better on the road than they are at home. 12-9-1 is the visiting team compared to 7-8-2 at the Enterprise Center. I'll take the Blues over the Canadians. Good to see you, John. Hopefully you actually did take IUPUI the other day. I wasn't sure if they were going to hang in because Wright State was running away with it early, but they came back to get the old cover. Sometimes those games are tricky. That's what happens when you have teams that play bad basketball. And if there's a team that plays bad basketball, you can start with IUPUI. They play today against Youngstown State. Not a whole lot to say there. The Penguins coming off a 78-56 win over Robert Morris. They're 11-5 on the year. They're 3-2 in the Horizon. They've won 4 out of their last 5 coming into this one. Not sure how big of an underdog IUPUI is today. Let's take a look because Ken Palm has them projected to lose by about 24 points. Yeah, the line is depending. It opened at 22.5. It's 23 or 23.5 at most books except PointsBet, which still has it at 22.5. Oh, boy. Danny Daniels talking about South Dakota State, North Dakota State in the FCS. Always exciting times watching those two teams play. Let me take a look here. North Dakota State, South Dakota State. Those two teams, always seem to be playing each other in the playoffs. Let's see. Let me pull this up here so I can look at the numbers. Okay. Well, South Dakota State already won this season over North Dakota State. They beat them 3 times in a row. But yeah, remember, this is a North Dakota State team that has plenty of experience when it comes to winning in the FCS title game. They've won 9 of the last 11. And further, the lone loss for South Dakota State this year was that exciting 7-3 game to Iowa back in the season opener where neither team scored a touchdown. God, that game seems like so long ago, but that was typical Iowa football all year. I don't know. North Dakota State is a pretty tough team. They run the ball very well. Averaging over 273 yards a game on the ground, 6.2 yards a carry. The defense is pretty good. And I get that South Dakota State is on a roll. They had to rally. They were down 21-7 in that game back in October. They outscored North Dakota State 16-0 in the second half to win 23-21. It's hard to see South Dakota State shutting down Hunter Lupke and everybody all game long like they did the first time. I think it's going to be a close game. You might see another 3 or 4 point margin. I would probably actually take the points because if there's one thing you can always look to, it's, who's been here and done that before. And it's North Dakota State. It's hard to stop a team that's won 9 titles in 11 years. I get South Dakota State is good against the run, but this is a North Dakota State team that is capable of making life miserable for opposing teams. They're excellent on the defensive side of the ball, and if they can keep Gronowski from making big plays in the passing game and take the air out of the ball by grinding away with Lupke and everybody else, I think this one's going to be 27-24, something like that, I'd take the 6 at North Dakota State, just based on the fact that, like I said, they've been here before. They know what's at stake, and they want to avenge that loss from October 15th. I think that North Dakota State will play their game, and they'll hang close enough if they don't win outright that they'll cover. I think it'll edge over 48. I mean, the first meeting had 44 points. I can see them putting up a few more on each side here to get over 48. And with that, we will go to everybody's favorite, the shot in the dark, or as Jim Williams should call it, the Chinese menu, where you take some from column A and some from column B and put it all together. We'll start with the Utah Jazz over the Bulls. I know the Bulls have won 2 straight. I know the Bulls beat Philadelphia last night. It's tough to play second game of a back-to-back. Thoughts about money, percentage of money bet and number of bets for games. The Blues, 77% of the public's on them, and 72% of the money's on Montreal. The tough part about that, Richie, is you don't know if the 72% is bet on Montreal with the puck line getting 1.5 goals, or if the 72% is bet of the money is bet on Montreal to win outright. If I had to guess, I would say that the 72% is more on Montreal to cover than anything else, because nobody trusts the Canadians at this point to beat anybody. To be honest, I don't necessarily read a whole lot into those, because sometimes you can get tricked by those numbers, because you all of a sudden you'll think, well, everybody else in their third cousin is on team X, but the money's going the other way. It comes down to, how confident are you in the team that you're picking? And, to me, that's what it's all about. It's about your commitment as a whole to the bet that you're making. For example, just looking at tomorrow's games here, 38% of the bets are on the Bears with 5.5 points against the Vikings, even though Nathan Peterman's starting at quarterback. Would you put faith in that 38%, knowing that Nathan Peterman is god awful and it's not Justin Fields throwing against that or playing against that secondary? I mean, I wouldn't. And I wouldn't put faith in stuff like that. Like I said, Montreal, anybody that's gonna, if 72% of the bets are backing Montreal, and I see 27 or 73-27 looking at covers real quick as far as percentages, Montreal at plus 132, and this is of course now compared to what it was earlier. I wouldn't put a ton of stock in it, because you look at how bad Montreal's been. They're below 500 against the spread, even being an underdog most nights. And on the money line, they're down to beat on the bone for me to back a Canadians team that's lost 7 straight at that kind of at plus 135. I mean, I get the Blues aren't great, but they've played better lately. So, like I said, to be honest, I don't pay attention to what the public is doing in either direction, because I do my own analysis, and if it matches up with what the public thinks, that's one thing. If it doesn't, that's another. But I don't let it influence me by any stretch of the imagination. Alabama on the hardwood in the first half. Ooh, let's see. There's so many college basketball games that it's hard to keep track of who's playing who, so I have to go back and look. Alabama and Kentucky, yeah. Kentucky, not a team that's had a lot of luck against the line lately. If you look, Kentucky is now 1-8-1 in their last 10 against the spread, just in games in general. Their one win came over North Florida back on November 23rd. Since then, they didn't cover by the 25.5 against Bellarmine. They didn't cover the 8 against Michigan or the 17 against Yale. They lost outright to UCLA. Didn't cover the 37 against Florida A&M. Didn't cover the 3 against Missouri. They lost that one outright. They pushed against the late line against Louisville, and they didn't cover against LSU the other day. They were favored by 10.5 and won by 3, and that game was at the Rupp Arena. Now you've got to go to Coleman Coliseum to face an Alabama team that's covered their last 2. They beat Mississippi State on the road by 11. They beat Ole Miss by 22 the other night. Nate Oates has a very good basketball team. I will tell you this. I saw Nate Oates when he coached at Buffalo before he took the Alabama job. That team will run you out of the building. And they have a lot of talented kids. Kentucky has the same problem they have every year. Everybody that plays is a freshman or a sophomore outside of Tshiebwe. And, they don't know how to deal with adversity. I think Alabama in the first half is a safe bet there. They play very good basketball on both ends. They're 20th in offensive efficiency, 12th in defensive efficiency. They're 7th in effective field goal percentage defense at 42.7. They're 13th in two-point defense at 43%. They're second in tempo at 74.6 possessions a game. So they'll try to run you out of the gym. The one thing you have to watch out with Alabama is they turn the ball over a lot. If Alabama plays at their pace, Kentucky's in trouble. Because Kentucky is a slow-paced team, which is weird because you're used to seeing Calipari's teams run. But they're just 260th in tempo, 66 possessions a game. If Alabama holds their own on the glass and keeps Kentucky from getting a bunch of second-chance opportunities, they'll be in good shape. But back to what we were talking about here, the Jazz over the Bulls. I know the Bulls beat Philadelphia. They also played last night, so they're playing the second game of back-to-back. Not always the easiest thing to do if you're Chicago. This season, they're dealing with some injuries. They don't have Caruso, who got hurt the other night. You look at the Bulls in the second game of back-to-back situations this year, 3-4. So they've at least had some success. But they don't play well on weekends, and you can take that for what it is. It's just weird. But 1-3 on Saturdays, 0-5 on Sundays, and 3-7 on Fridays. So when it comes to the weekend for everybody else, the Bulls are struggling. They're 4-15 in games Friday through Sunday this season. Read into that what you will. It's just one of those weird statistics that pops out when you look at numbers long enough. The Lakers and the Kings, I know the Lakers combined with Atlanta for 244 last night. And I know Sacramento scores a lot of points. But 240 points is a lot to look at on a regular basis. You look at the Lakers are 1-4 in the second game of back-to-backs this year. They give up a truckload of points in those games, 129. I just don't know if they can get to 240. You look at what Sacramento has done lately. They had a total of, I think it was 241 against Memphis a couple of weeks ago. Or maybe it might have even been last week. But, the Kings in their last few games, they've gone under in 3 straight. They had 226 in the game against Memphis on New Year's Day against a total of 239. 232 against Utah with a total of 242.5, and 237 in the loss to Atlanta in a game that had a total of 245. So the Kings games have really high totals, but they've stayed under in 5 of their last 7. The Lakers have stayed under in 3 of 4 before the game against Atlanta last night, and they barely got past the total yesterday. They totaled 244 against a number of 242. In fact, both the overs that the Lakers have had in the last 5 were against the Hawks. I just don't know if we're going to get to that kind of point total with the Lakers playing the second game of back-to-back and missing pieces. And you're looking at the injury report, and, Lonnie Walker's out till late January. Austin Reeves is out till late January. Swider's out. Anthony Davis is out. Troy Brown is questionable. This game will end up it'll end up at 238 or 237 or something like that. Andrew says Tatum over 2.5 threes. Well, I mean, the good part is they're playing San Antonio, and God knows San Antonio doesn't know how to play defense. Sure, they beat the Pistons yesterday, but that doesn't really say a whole lot when you get right down to it. Tatum knocking down on average this season better than 3 threes per game. 117 threes made in 37 games. Obviously, you'd like his percentage to be better than what it is at 34.6, but you have to think he'll get enough opportunities to go over that number. Like Crystal was talking earlier about the Rangers over the Devils, and we talked about it early in the show. The Devils, not the same team at the Prudential Center as they are in anybody else's barn. 10-10 and 2 at home, 14-2-1 on the road. Meanwhile, the Rangers, they're another team that play better on the road than they do at Madison Square Garden. They're 9-7-4 at the Garden, 13-5-2 as a visiting team. They're on the road here. I like Shesterkin. The Rangers have played well their last 3. New Jersey just 3-6-1 in their last 10. May the bloom is off the rose a little bit for Vitek Vanacek between the pipes. Blackwood, of course, is banged up. Took a puck off his thumb or something during warm-ups the other day against Detroit. So I'll go with the Rangers there. The Sabres getting plus money at home over the Wild. I get Minnesota has a lot of offensive weapons. So do the Sabres. You probably couldn't go wrong. You probably would go fairly well with the over in this game as well, because goaltending has been questionable for both of these teams for long stretches of the season. The Sabres 7-2-1 in their last 10. Minnesota, they're 8-2 in their last 10. They're coming off a win over Tampa Bay, but they play better at home than they do on the road. Like I said, you could probably ride the over here. Minnesota has scored at least 4 goals in 3 of their last 4. And going back longer, they've scored at least 4 goals in 7 of their last 9. Meanwhile, you're looking at a Buffalo team that is near the top of the league when it comes to denting the twine this season. In fact, they come in to this game ranked number 1 with 3.94 goals a game. That's the good news. The bad news is neither one of these teams like to necessarily play defense. So it could be a high-scoring affair at the First Niagara Center. The Raiders, I'm going to take the points over the Chiefs. We talked about it last week when we talked about the Chiefs and the Broncos. Kansas City has issues with putting games away. We saw it last week against Denver. We've seen it multiple times. Depending on where you look right now, the line is down to 8.5 at Bet Rivers and Unibet, and BetMGM is 9 a lot of places. FanDuel still has it at 9.5. If you want to jump on there. The Chiefs 1-10-1 against the spread in their last 12 after a straight-up win. They're 0-6 against the number in their last 6 against the AFC West. They're 0-4 in their last 4 against on the road against the number. They're 1-7-1 in their last 9 overall against the number. That was the win over Seattle on Christmas Eve. But, they were double-digit favorites against Houston. They had to go to overtime. They were double-digit favorites against Denver last week. They won by 3, helped by a questionable OPI call on Cortland Sutton. They were 8.5-point favorites against Denver in mid-December, up 27-0, had to win 34-28. They didn't cover as 16.5-point favorites against the Rams. They didn't cover against the Chargers. They pushed against Jacksonville. They were favored by 2 touchdowns against Malik Willis and the Titans back in November. Had to go to overtime to win that one. The one game that they played really well was back in October when they beat San Francisco by 3 touchdowns. Kansas City should win the game. Let's be honest. But the question is, can they cover a line? And, you look at the first meeting this year, they won 30-29 over the Raiders at Arrowhead. They give up a lot of points. They give up a lot of yards. We saw Jarrett Stidham look very good against the 49ers last week. And his first start with the team went 23 of 34 for 365, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. And he took the 49ers to overtime. I think it's safe to say the 49ers defense is a lot better than the Kansas City Chiefs defense. And anybody that doesn't think so, you can question whether they've actually watched any football this season. Bryce asking about UAB, Florida International. The only thing that concerns me about UAB is the fact that they've gone 0-2 on the road. They're 5-7-2 against the number. But Florida International is 4-8. Let's see. They lost to Florida Atlantic by 2 on the road. They lost to West Virginia by 11. Florida International is not very good. They lost to Florida Atlantic by 26 on the road back on December 17th. They lost to North Texas by 15. They beat Charlotte by 2. That's what I got to say about beating Charlotte by 2. Meanwhile, UAB beat Charlotte by 8. Let me take a look here. This is going to be another one of those games where you look at tempo and everything else. Well, both teams like to run. Florida International turns it over a lot. They don't shoot threes very well. They don't play defense. UAB can crash the glass pretty hard. They're good on the offensive glass. They're 10th in the country in offensive rebound percentage. FIU is 294th. Florida International is also 307th in giving up offensive rebounds. They're horrible defending the 3. I think UAB will probably win by about 15. So I think they'll cover the 11. What is it, 11 and a half? 11, somewhere around there. Let's see. Okay, it's a depend. If you're going to jump on it soon because I see the lines moving. It's gone. It's 11 and a half at FanDuel and WinBet. Then a bunch of books have it at 12. BetMGM has it at 12 and a half. Caesars has it at 13. I think they'll win by 13 or 15, 17 points. But you don't want to watch it float up on you too far either. But yeah, I don't trust Florida International. I get they're 7-2 at home compared to 0-5 on the road, but they just struggled to beat Florida College by 5 points the other day or last week, and nobody is intimidated by Florida College, which is obviously not a Division I program. Florida International sucks. Notre Dame, yeah, I like Notre Dame with the points. I took Wake Forest against North Carolina with the points the other day, and that worked out. Nebraska, that's going to be a rock fight because neither team can score, neither team can shoot. If Nebraska covers, it's because Minnesota misses free throws. Minnesota third worst in the country at free throw percentage at 59. Just horrid free throw shooting. Stidham, like I just said, he lit up San Francisco. He should let up Kansas City for over 235.5 through the air. Tulane's a pick 'em against Temple. I like Tulane. They like to run. They play good basketball offensively. And Temple's a middle-of-the-road team on both ends of the floor. I think Tulane will get the win in the city of brotherly love. Nevada over San Jose State. As the song used to go in WCW, don't turn your back on the wolf pack because you might wind up in a body bag. Nevada's won 5 straight. They're coming off a win over Colorado State at home. They're 3-0 in the Mountain West. They're 13-3 overall. Steve Alford has that team playing very well. San Jose State, they've played pretty good basketball. They're coming off a loss to Boise State. We've also seen them lose to Hofstra, North Texas, Pacific. It's going to be another one of those games where tempo is a factor. San Jose State wants to suck the air out of the ball. They're 350th in tempo. Makes Nevada look downright fast at 245th. But Nevada shoots free throws well, and that's going to be the difference in the game. LaSalle is a pick 'em over Rhode Island. I hate Rhode Island. They beat Fordham the other night. I thought Fordham was going to win the game. LaSalle, they've had their struggles. They've lost 4 of their last 5, but Rhode Island is not a good basketball team. Rhode Island doesn't score. They're one of the worst shooting teams in the country. They come in 5-9. They've lost to Quinnipiac and Texas State at home. They lost to Providence and Brown at home. They lost to Georgia State and Duquesne and BC on the road. They've also lost some neutral site games. It's going to be close, but I think LaSalle will put it away at the end. I just can't trust Rhode Island with as bad as they shoot, and they turn the ball over a lot. 21.3% of their possessions end up in turnovers. And finally, Evan Engram over 4.5 catches. He caught 11 balls against Tennessee in the first meeting. The Titans don't defend the pass, as we talked about already. This should be a game where Engram becomes a second-level threat and creates issues for opposing teams. They did say in Boston College +10 against Duke in Chestnut Hill. My concern is you're going to get a pissed-off Duke team after they got housed by NC State. BC is another team that doesn't shoot the ball all that well. I know this isn't the Duke teams of old, but it's still a Duke team that's pretty good on the offensive glass and who can shoot the ball. And they're pretty good on the defensive side of things. They already beat BC by 16 in Cameron Indoor back in early December. I'm a little leery of Boston College just because they play so badly on the offensive end. Indiana State playing UIC. Indiana State, they've won 3 straight after losing 3 in a row. Got back on track. They beat Evansville, which is no surprise. They beat Valparaiso, not really a surprise either. And they beat Illinois State. They're 5-0 in the Missouri Valley. UIC lost to Bradley, lost to Belmont. They've lost 3 out of 4. They're another team that has issues shooting the ball. Indiana State, yeah, that's probably a safe bet there. Like you see there, if you bet the money line on everything, 186, 819.95 on a hundo. if you go with the point spreads, $200,000 on a hundo if everything comes through. So some good numbers there to be had. And that will wrap up today's show for Saturday, January 7th. Like I said at the top of the show, make sure you hit the like and subscribe buttons so you never miss the show in case you don't set your alarm. So that way you can go and watch it afterwards in case you can't be here when it's on at 9 a.m. Eastern. Also, like I said, check out the parlay or the parlay just for you guys in the show box below. It's also got a promo code. You can use it to save 50% off that parlay or any of the packages that are available. Can't go wrong with saving 50%. But that'll do it. Good luck with your bets this weekend. Be safe. Look forward to seeing you all here next week. Bryce, anything's possible, but it's all about making sure that we get enough viewer engagement and everything else. The more that the views and everything go up and things, then it becomes more feasible because everybody sees that we're doing something that's that the public wants, and that's what it boils down to. So, as the late Bobby Heenan once said on Saturday Night's Main Event, tell your friends, tell your neighbors' friends, tell your friends' neighbors. The more people that watch, the more people that show up, the more people that get involved, the better off it is. But enjoy the rest of your weekend. Enjoy Week 18 of the NFL schedule. Enjoy the college football playoff national championship game on Monday. Be safe out there. We will see you next week. Thanks for being here. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. We'll catch you later.